In 2019, Wildworks, the creators behind legendary kids virtual world Animal Jam, announced a brand new 3D MMO. Fer.al, or just Fer.al for the purposes of this video, took the stylized art and story themes of Animal Jam and adapted them into a more advanced and content-packed 3D world for older kids. This was a fantastic move not only because the beautiful and expansive world attracted a brand new audience, but because it drew back the old audience of Animal Jam players that had grown up and out of the simplistic child's game. This was a natural and much needed evolution, with unique new creatures to players, extensive home and character customization, collecting and crafting, and a more mature tone. Fer.al drew in old and new players by the thousands and made a name for itself as a popular and well-liked game with a bright future. And just a few weeks ago, the community imploded and spiraled into hell as the game closed down permanently overnight and left the players who had supported it for years in the dark. Unbeknownst to them, Wildworks had been working on a secret project called Cinder, and to their horror, this was revealed to be a crypto and NFT based game. But that's only the tip of the iceberg, and today we'll be looking at the failures, lies, and scandals that led to the shocking decision, as well as the firestorm that ensued afterwards. In just a few months, Wildworks went from an iconic and beloved game studio with a bright future for their new game to a shell of their former selves, having lost their dignity, their entire player base, and all of the goodwill that they once had. Today, let's tackle the trashfire that is Fer.al and how the beloved game fell from grace. Before we start, I just want to give a huge thank you to Switchcraft for sponsoring this video. Switchcraft is a gorgeous and gripping visual novel style mobile game that combines choose your own adventure and graphic novel elements with magical match 3 gameplay. In this story about modern day witches, you play as Bailey Ward, a freshman at the Pendle Hill Academy for Witchcraft, as she solves the mystery behind the disappearance of her best friend Lydia. With over 400 choices, you control the narrative and make choices for Bailey as she uncovers the mystery and develops relationships with a huge cast of characters in a story with literal TV quality writing, like I'm playing this at the moment and I've been binging it like Netflix. Not only are the characters and story super cool, but there are thousands of super fun and engaging match 3 levels to master as you make your way through a story of magic and mystery. I'm a sucker for beautiful art, and wow is Switchcraft beautiful, from the gorgeous character designs and locations to the super beautiful and calming game and sound design. The game also features a diverse cast including LGBTQ+ and disabled characters from multiple cultural backgrounds, which is super cool and a big part of the reason that I'm so excited to share this with you guys. While solving the mystery of Lydia's disappearance, you'll meet tons of characters who are hiding secrets, but honestly so far I kinda suspect it was Chancellor Swan, not gonna lie. She's a little too eager to push the narrative that Lydia ran away, that's all I'm saying. Definitely let me know in the comments who you guys think was involved, because there are a lot of suspicious characters at Pendle Hill Academy. If you couldn't tell, I'm super excited to share Switchcraft with you guys. I love modern fantasy and visual novels and amazing art, and this game combines all three and more. I'm so excited to continue Bailey's story, and I think you guys will love it, so if you want to teleport into a spellbinding world of magic and mystery, head to the link in the description to download Switchcraft for free today. Thank you so much to Switchcraft for sponsoring this video, and now let's get on with the downfall of Fer.al. So Fer.al has been shut down, the developers are radio silent, and the entire community is collectively freaking out like it's the 3D multiplayer furry apocalypse. But how exactly did we get to this point? Well, let's rewind all the way back to 2010 with the launch of Animal Jam. Animal Jam is an educational virtual world for kids developed by Wildworks in collaboration with National Geographic. I made a deep dive video about Animal Jam since I was an avid player as a kid, but the long and short of it is that Animal Jam got very popular very quickly. By 2011, less than a year after its launch, it had over 1 million players, and from there the numbers grew exponentially. Today there's over 130 million registered players globally, a huge fan base of artists, writers, and content creators, and of course a fat stack of millions of dollars generated through in-game purchases. And speaking of in-game purchases, which will come up a lot in this video, Animal Jam was no stranger to them, and they were also no stranger to criticism. The game, like many other virtual worlds for kids, has been accused of having a predatory pay-to-play model with items and gameplay locked behind membership and premium currency paywalls. I know most games have this, but Animal Jam was monetized pretty intensely to the point where it was common for kids to bully non-members or those with quote-unquote poor clothes. The criticism towards AJ didn't just stop at paywalls. They got on hot water for bugs and glitches, bad PR and moderation, and questionable decisions about gameplay features, and if you're wondering why I'm bringing all of this up, it's because all of these issues are going to come up again when we discuss Fer.al. Animal Jam was incredibly popular and profitable riding off the kids' virtual world boom of the 2010s, though after hitting its peak around 2014, numbers gradually began to decline. We've seen a lot of iconic virtual worlds shut down in recent years, and that's because their audiences have simply aged up and out of them. The kids and tweens who flocked in droves to Animal Jam in the 2010s are adults now. They have jobs and relationships and school and responsibilities. At least most of them. This, in combination with the fact that kids' virtual worlds just aren't quite as popular as they were in the 2010s, meant that Animal Jam was losing a lot of dedicated players and not really gaining them back, leading to dropping player numbers. Which leads us to, the development of Fer.al. Wildworks had dipped their toes into the pool of 3D online worlds with their 3D remake of Animal Jam, but Fer.al was an entirely new IP with beautiful open levels, unique creatures, and far more in-depth customization. It shared a similar art style and nature/animal based focus, but stripped away the heavy censorship and educational tone, instead emphasizing a more mature tone and an older target demographic. Role-playing was not only possible but openly encouraged and advertised as a feature, and gathering, crafting, and quest mechanics gave the game a more structured RPG-like feel. Not only was the game more open and, let's face it, fun, but it was far more hip with the kids. Unlike Animal Jam, which had worked hard to maintain a very squeaky clean corporate image to appeal to parents, Fer.al was for cool older kids and had a big Discord where all of the players and staff could hang out and chat. It was far more casual, and it was a really good way for the creators and developers to build up a good rapport and friendship with the players. Of course, the Discord would come back to bite them in the ass later, but we'll get to that. Fer.al launched its closed beta test on December the 17th, 2019, which players had to sign up for and be invited to, with Animal Jam influencers and Jambassadors being some of the first to receive invites. Regular players were invited in waves over the next few months, which was great for both testing the servers and building hype. Though the game was admittedly buggy and rough around the edges, that's what beta tests are for, and the team at Wildworks were extremely receptive towards player feedback and had dedicated feedback and bug report pages available. Staff were fairly active, and updates and communication were frequent, which is definitely key to building player trust and goodwill at an early stage. This goodwill was tested though when Wildworks introduced the dragon avatar as the first paid item into the game on April 14th. Players found it ridiculous that they, as beta testers, were being forced to pay for the content that they were meant to be testing, and felt it was inappropriate for a very unpolished early beta game to have paid content. Still, despite the $5 price tag, the dragon avatar was well received, and the number of players willing to pay for the premium item gave Wildworks the green light to continue monetizing their pre-release game. Shortly after this, on May the 20th, the closed beta came to an end and Fer.al officially opened up its early access build to the public. Just as the name suggests, the game was still in a very early access state. It was very bare bones, it had a lot of bugs and glitches, and it had a lot of content planned for the future. And though players flooded in by the thousands, little did they know that the game would never come out of early access. It may seem like Wildworks' decision to shut down Fer.al was completely random and out of the blue, but there were issues from day one that hinted at larger, more worrying problems with development. We're gonna go a lot more in depth later, but basically Fer.al's three big problems were questionable development and gameplay decisions, lack of money, and poor communication. These issues were all intertwined and fed into one another, and all of the dramas that we're about to cover generally fit under one or more of these categories. Now there's a lot to cover here, and I promise that this context is necessary and will be important later, so let's just go chronologically through 2 years of red flags in the lead up to the shutdown of Fer.al. By June, the game had been going strong for a few months, and staff player morale was at an all-time high. Staff were very receptive of player feedback, helped by the new community manager Petz Catz, who bridged the gap between staff and players and made the community feel heard. On June the 26th, a survey was sent out to a number of players asking if they were familiar with the concept of season passes and battle passes, and a few days later the first season pass was released. The season pass was free to all players and gave them a couple of months to complete challenges to unlock exclusive items, with a premium paid option available to those who wanted to automatically unlock them all. Ex-Fer.al moderator Indigo, who wrote an extensive document on the situation, wrote, quote, "This first pass set the bar for passes, and a very low bar at that. Many of the challenges were ridiculously hard and near impossible to beat. They required players to spend hours grinding in minigames to get hundreds of thousands of points, which had to be done in one go and weren't cumulative. The difficulty of the pass was eventually eventually lowered, and players who finished the challenges before they were made cumulative were promised compensation, but Wildworks just never followed up on this. The season pass required an estimated 30 hours or more to complete, with most of this being tedious and repetitive grinding, and Wildworks' implementation of features that require inhuman amounts of grinding for very low returns will come up again. To be honest though, none of this was super bad or anything, and players were pretty forgiving. It was Fer.al's first season pass after all, and with the game being in early access, there were bound to be a few balancing issues and bugs. Unfortunately though, the passes would only decrease in quality from here. Shortly after the launch of Season 2, which took one step forward in terms of difficulty balancing and 2 steps back in terms of bugginess and quality, the developers dropped a huge update with a highly requested feature, leveling. Fer.al was still pretty bare bones at this point, and players had given a lot of feedback about wanting more fulfilling gameplay and a more structured gameplay loop. All of the collecting and crafting felt a bit hollow when there was no way to mark their progress, so a leveling system was a huge deal and everyone was super excited about it, except for the fact that leveling was totally broken on launch. Almost immediately, players found exploits in the system and became mega leveled up gods through dying and unbinding items, leading to the game shutting down temporarily and all players having their levels reset. The leveling was also super unbalanced, like players were spending multiple hours grinding just to get their first few levels, which in a game like Fer.al should be pretty simple. Players calculated that it would take over 130 hours to go from level 1 to level 100, and when it's quicker and easier to reach that level in Elden Ring, you know your game has an issue. Leveling mainly consisted of grinding until your wrist hurt and you had eye strain, so unfortunately it wasn't really the breath of fresh air that the community had hoped for. Season 3 launched in November of 2020 and immediately began causing severe lag and frame rate issues to an unplayable degree for some, and a later issue prevented players from logging in properly. The Wildworks team had given players extensions on the previous seasons to make up for the glitches, but Season 3, the season that literally locked players out of their accounts, wasn't extended and lots of players missed out on completing challenges. But it was around this time that the first true red flags began to show and Wildworks' complete communication breakdown began to make itself apparent. In the beginning, the community was bustling and supportive, and the staff all seemed very passionate and dedicated and like they actually cared. Players could look past the annoying balancing issues and game-breaking glitches because the staff were receptive to feedback, pretty transparent about what they'd been working on and what bugs they'd encountered, and heavily encouraged open communication. However, things began to break down in December of 2020 when Wildworks introduced their brand new feedback system. If you're one of those people who watch without the visuals, I'm doing air quotes like crazy right now. Players had to click an off-site link to reach the feedback portal, which was abandoned almost immediately. Updates stopped appearing on the portal a week after its launch, and it stayed that way ever since. The Discord feedback channel was abandoned as well, with its description now reading, quote, "See pins for how to submit official feedback. This channel is for player-to-player discussion of game features and a place to poll your fellow players on in-game topics." Any feedback posted there was now considered player-to-player discussion, and with the feedback portal completely abandoned, Wildworks had effectively cut off all player feedback in one fell swoop. They added a bunch of server helpers in March of 2021 to help out with this, but after repeatedly passing feedback up the chain of command and just never hearing back, they sort of had to give up. To be clear, I absolutely don't blame the mods, server helpers, or staff. They were trying their best to make the community feel heard, but with seemingly little support from the Wildworks higher up, there was only so much they could do. By now, I'm sure you can tell that bugs were common, and for the most part this was fine since it was an early access game and that's sort of to be expected. But multiple times throughout development, actively harmful bugs occurred, causing rapidly flashing lights. Some of these glitches were fixed and some were not, and despite players asking Wildworks to add a photosensitive epilepsy warning for players who might accidentally stumble across these glitches, it was never added. Season 4 passed largely without issue. Obviously there were debilitating bugs and glitches, but by this point players had come to just accept it as a spicy garnish on their season pass. Season 5 was extended for a whopping 23 days to give staff time to, quote, polish some exciting new content coming in Season Pass 6. Players grew concerned that Wildworks was falling behind on their updates as bugs and glitches piled up, and it turns out those players were right. Season 6 was bad. Like really bad. Not only was it one of the most notoriously buggy passes ever added to the game, but the new update added some of the worst features yet. They locked the ability to add custom decals and patterns to your character behind a paywall, adding it as season pass content for all future players. Customization and creative freedom were always a part of the Fer.al marketing and one of their biggest features, so locking it behind a paywall upset a lot of players. They also introduced a brand new harvestable resource called Sky Jellies to the season pass, but the only avatar that could harvest the airborne items with the new Flying Phoenix avatar. The avatar was, you guessed it, locked behind a premium currency paywall, though they could also unlock it at level 42. It was basically either grind for tens of hours playing the same repetitive minigames over and over, or pay money, and a lot of players felt like this was just a roundabout way of adding another paywall to the season pass. The last big feature was an unexpected and unwelcome surprise, the addition of voice chat. I'm sure many of you out there have played video games with voice chat before, and if so, you know what a toxic cesspool it can be. There's just something about COD lobbies that brings out the worst in humanity. Anyway, voice chat is all well and good in games for more mature audiences, but Fer.al was explicitly developed with a tween and teen audience in mind. To be fair, the voice chat was sectioned off into different invite-only rooms, but it was easy for players to invite others into their VC with the intent of trolling, pranking, or even straight up harassing them. It's great that they were implementing safety measures, but in my opinion, voice chat has no place in a game targeted towards a younger demographic because of how toxic and hard to moderate it can be. But don't take my word for it, here's Wildworks CEO Clark Stacy saying it. Despite players and also apparently the CEO voicing safety concerns, the feature remained. Alright, hopefully you guys are bearing with me so far. We're nearly to the NFT stuff. So far the staff had been holding it together despite the bugs and glitches and the server shutdowns and the communication breakdowns and the unkept promises. Somehow they were holding it all together and maintaining that classic Wildworks professionalism. But by July 30th, 2021, things began to very publicly break down. In a long update post, Wildworks announced that they would be stepping back from making new season passes in order to polish and re-release the previous passes, which they admitted had been sidelined in order of pushing out Fer.al's mobile release quicker. It was a sort of hiatus, though they reassured players that Fer.al wasn't shutting down, which didn't age well. They also revealed that a lot of the Animal Jam team had been pitching in to help speed up Fer.al's development. As we previously discussed, a lot of issues with Fer.al stem from the game not earning enough money. All of the broken challenges and server lag were a symptom of rush season passes, and those rush season passes were a symptom of needing to push out more and more content to earn more revenue. The bugs, glitches, and lack of staff communication were likely because they were busy focusing on the lucrative mobile market in hopes of adding another revenue stream. My theory is that Animal Jam pitching in to help was out of necessity to finish all of the rushed content, but then when they realized that Fer.al was failing commercially, they sobered up and sent them back to Animal Jam. After all, even though the numbers had been declining, Animal Jam is by far their most popular and profitable game, so if they had to salvage one of the two, it would probably be Animal Jam. And I don't mean this in a bad way, like, oh, they were greedy and money hungry and they let it get to their head, because I don't think that's the case at all. Game development is expensive. A large-scale project like Fer.al is very expensive, and they had to resort to mobile releases and paid content out of necessity. The fact they had basically been treading water and making no profit on the game explains a lot of their erratic decisions. Anyway, as with a lot of pre-release games, hiatuses are generally not a good sign, and players were worried. Updates began to slow down after this, and the quality of their releases was abysmal, even though the whole purpose of the re-releases was to polish and fix them. Dangerous bugs were added and challenges were broken, and they accidentally launched the original Season 3 rather than the re-release, which was completely unplayable, and it took them 2 days to take it down. By this point, players had no idea what was going on, and the mask of professionalism had dropped as communication was non-existent, and features that shipped completely broken took days to fix, if they were ever fixed. And this, my friends, is where the Trashfire turns into a circus. So now we're getting into NFT territory, oh boy, and I'm gonna assume that by this point most of you know what NFTs and cryptocurrency are. NFT stands for non-fungible token. They're minted on the blockchain and brought with cryptocurrency, and they usually take the form of art, animation, and GIFs, most of which are incredibly ugly. Generally considered terrible for the environment, damaging to artists due to rampant art theft, rife with scams, and basically just a system that targets vulnerable people with the promise that their NFTs will skyrocket in price and make them millionaires. Obviously this doesn't happen very often, and because so many people gamble away their money in the hopes that their monkey pick will someday put their kids through college, they've been called pyramid schemes and scams. This is literally only scraping the tiniest tip of the iceberg that is NFTs and the myriad problems with them, so I'm gonna recommend a video that I'm sure a lot of you have seen, Dan Olsen's Line Goes Up, the problem with NFTs video. It's brilliant and well researched and explains things a lot better than I ever could. With that out of the way, let's continue. On November 27th, a post was made on Fer.al's Twitter and Discord announcing the release of their brand new blockchain-based game / crypto metaverse called Cinder. Hey Fer.alians, many of you have been asking us about NFTs, blockchain games, and whether or not these technologies are coming to Fer.al. To put things simply, they are not. However, Wildworks will soon be announcing a new game that is blockchain based, so we'd like to take a moment to answer your question. Join our CEO Clark Stacey for an AMA on Fer.al's Discord server tonight at 6 PM. In the rather poorly received AMA, Wildworks CEO Clark Stacey promised players that Cinder would not be replacing Fer.al and was actually just a way to acquire more funding for the game so it could be maintained and updated. Why is Cinder being developed right now when Fer.al is in such an early state? That's a fair question. The short answer is because we want Fer.al to get to the point where ongoing development is self-sustaining. Right now we invest more in it than we make. That doesn't mean we're abandoning it, it means that the company needs multiple revenue streams to sustain projects like Fer.al that aren't self-sustaining yet. Usually here I'd say, oh, keep that in mind for later, put a pin in that, but there's no point in burying the lead. We all know what happened next. Progress on Fer.al crawled to a standstill over the new year as the game quickly devolved into an unkept buggy mess and months elapsed with virtually no updates. Fer.al was finally put out of its misery around February 16th of 2022, coinciding with the minting of several thousand Wildworks Cinder NFTs, which also went live that day. The community was left confused and in the dark as Wildworks shut off the Fer.al servers and effectively ended the game without so much as a warning, and the Fer.al website was wiped as well. The next day, Wildworks issued an objectively pathetic explanation in their Discord, writing, quote, "Wildworks management has made the decision to bring the Fer.al project to an end. What does this mean? 1. The Fer.al Discord will remain open until this time tomorrow. If you would like to spin up an alt server, please go ahead and share the link here so that you all may continue to congregate there. 2. Fer.al web servers will be shut down effective immediately. There will be no access to the game for a brief period of time. 3. On February 19th, we will open up the servers one more time for a 24-hour period so that everyone can go in, screenshot their items, say their goodbyes, etc. After this time period, the game servers will be shut down and there will be no more access. We appreciate everyone's passion and dedication for Fer.al." Now for reference, a game sunsetting or shutting down is usually a really big deal. A lot of games go out with a bang, throwing big server-wide sunset parties and celebrating the community together, and most importantly they make it known to their community that the game is shutting down. For anyone not in the Fer.al Discord, the game went dark with absolutely no warning or explanation because Wildworks didn't bother to update their social media or website with the fact that their game had literally shut down. Even today their socials haven't been updated and are just sitting in disuse without so much as a goodbye post or explanation as to what happened. Okay, just jumping in here, I'm editing in post, but I had to add this because it's so unbelievable. The Wildworks admin did an AMA after they decided to shut the game down, and they were basically trying to answer people's questions. When someone asked why they changed their minds from sunsetting to closing, the Wildworks admin replied, quote, "We felt that ultimately the project's utility as a gathering spot for positivity and edification was ceasing to be effective." So it's like, oh, okay, so this decision was based around the fact that the community wasn't positive enough and not the fact that you invested millions of dollars into the game and didn't get any returns. For some reason, this particular admin just tried to spin it around and make it like a weird gaslighting thing, like you guys caused this. The thing that stung the most was that Fer.al had always prided itself on its community, on its big family Discord server and all of the in-jokes and the symbiosis between the players and developers as they worked on the game together. 2 years of financial support, 2 years of emotional investment in the game and the people that made it, 2 years of forming this close community only to be tossed a LuKremBo, by the way, we shut down the entire game last night, thanks bye, in the Discord server. The worst part was that Fer.al wasn't even shutting down, it was simply rebranding into a slimy NFT crypto metaverse project that players would have to pay hundreds to even play. Obviously, after this bombshell dropped, the Discord server devolved into complete and utter chaos. Petitions were started, the hashtag #StompOutCinder was started, anti-NFT Discords and Twitter accounts began popping up, and the servers were going absolutely feral, pun intended. Most of the mods quit and made their stance against NFTs clear, and shortly before the Discord closed, Wildworks mentioned parting ways with a number of employees. Many have attributed this to walkouts because of the NFTs, but I think that it's more than likely that they were simply laid off. It's clear that Wildworks was paying out of pocket to keep Fer.al open, and when you don't even have enough money to keep your game up and running, you probably don't have enough money to maintain a large team of artists, developers, coders, designers, and writers. One employee review on the website Glassdoor reads, quote, "Not very transparent. Multiple unexpected layoffs throughout the years, which doesn't make it reliable. A fair amount of crunching or cutting features due to bad production/management. After leaving the company, I realized my salary wasn't even close to a fair salary, so be smart when you're giving your numbers. Not very clear how to grow in the company." Alongside reinforcing the idea that players had to crunch to put season passes out and likely cut planned features, it confirms that layoffs did in fact occur. There are actually quite a number of negative employee reviews on Glassdoor which give insight into how the company treated their employees, and it doesn't reflect great. However, I would take these with a grain of salt since a lot of them are trolling or spam posts. Anyway, let's talk about Clark Stacey. Stacey is the co-founder and CEO of Wildworks, and taking a look at any amount of Fer.al discussion online, you will hear his name come up a lot, and usually not in a good context. Before he became public enemy number one, he was actually seen within the fandom as a sort of lovable dad meme figure. He was very active in the community, interacted with players, and even had one player's meme art as his Instagram profile picture. However, the attitude towards him soured very quickly when he began getting into and publicly supporting NFTs in 2021. He stated multiple times that he wasn't trying to promote NFTs to Fer.al's player base, but he also spent hours in the Discord discussing it and singing its praises, so I don't know, take from that what you will. Amongst the chaos of the final day, the Wildworks admin account emerged to do another AMA, and it wasn't received very well. They kept getting distracted by reactions and at one point asked if people wanted free stuff, and it's like, the game's gone, my guy, there's no stuff left. This AMA really didn't go well. The admin was very standoffish and curt with their responses, and it was also pretty infamous for spawning a lot of very widely screenshotted posts. There's a weird part where someone asks him if they'll be using the user-made content in Cinder, to which he replies no, but I mean technically you consented to it when you joined Fer.al, so we could totally take your stuff, but we won't. An absolutely unbelievable quote from the AMA reads, "If I knew about NFTs back in 2016, I would probably be doing something else by now and using a bored ape as my avatar. I don't own an ape, and I work here." Brilliant. One comment by the Wildworks admin account reads, "But you support using Discord? Wiping your credit and debit card? Driving a car? Having lights on in your house? Nearly everything we do as humans hurts the environment. We each have to do our part to limit the impact. To say, I'm never going to support NFTs crypto until they don't harm the environment means you also can't support anything that uses electricity." The Discord was eventually closed, officially severing all contact between Wildworks and the Fer.al community, and several fan-made servers popped up. So let's actually take a look at Cinder as a game. One particularly interesting passage of note from one of the Discord AMAs reads, quote, "Is Cinder using existing Fer.al assets, or is this from the ground up a new game set in the same universe? It is using the technology platform we built for Fer.al and initially many of the Fer.al assets. It has already diverged considerably, and the heritage won't be obvious soon after launch." The heritage won't be obvious soon after launch is an interesting way of saying we're ripping the map, locations, character models, and GUI directly from Fer.al. The character models in the game, known as the Cinder Fae, are just the Fae avatars from the Season 6 Fer.al Pass, and so far all of the locations shown off in the trailers and on the website are just map locations from Fer.al. It's basically just Fer.al, but as far as I can tell it doesn't have crafting, quests, or customization, since you have to stick with your pre-existing Cinder Fae. And speaking of, the mint has gone live and we can see Wildworks' lovely selection of NFTs here. I love clashing colors and tacky accessories on a design that has absolutely no aesthetic appeal whatsoever. If you don't know much about NFTs, you might be wondering why these things are so gross, and that's because they're all randomly generated. There's actually only 4,444 of them so far, and each of them cost between 0.85 Sol, or about $75 US, all the way to 1,000 Sol, aka $85,000 US. The most expensive Cinder Fae currently is 293, which cost nearly $1 million. NFTs are actually a fucking joke, but before I go off on a tangent, let me digress. The point is, these things are expensive and you have to buy in if you want to play, which means spending a decent chunk of money even for the cheapest Cinder Fae. Players brought up the fact that you have to be over 18 to even own a crypto wallet, and most Fer.al players wouldn't be able to participate, but Stacey made it very clear that he knew Fer.al players would hate NFTs and that they weren't the target audience. Wildworks plan on opening the Fer.al servers for one more time for a 24-hour period on the 19th of February to give players one last send-off, but but this was met with criticism since it technically broke Fer.al's terms of service. According to their TOS, they had to give 30 days notice before shutting the game down. In response to the backlash, Wildworks moved the date back to the 26th of March and for some unknown reason shortened the open period from 24 hours to just 3 hours from 9 AM to 12 PM. I have no idea if this is because the server cost would be too high or if they were genuinely just pissed off with the community, but this new 3-hour time period means that only a select few time zones will actually get to access the game at a reasonable hour. The website was updated from a blank page to a statement notifying players about the change, and bizarrely over the last few days several admins from the original Fer.al server have attempted to join fan-made discords. Now personally I think the drama around this is a little bit overblown, like mods were talking about locking down the servers and players were accusing Wildworks of infiltrating their servers to spy on them for nefarious purposes. It is pretty weird and unprofessional, but I think if anything they were probably joining to see the community's reaction. Like if my company dropped a bombshell like that and then immediately cut off all contact, I'd probably want to see what the players were saying too. Although maybe I'm wrong, maybe it was a secret ops mission to obtain intelligence on Fer.al players, who knows. And that's where our tumultuous story ends. As of today, Fer.al is scheduled to open for 3 hours on the 26th of March, the Discord is gone, and 5 months after the announcement they still haven't posted about Fer.al's closure on any of their social media accounts. It's almost like they're embarrassed or something. Fer.al is effectively gone for good, and while Clark Stacey did mention wanting to potentially reboot the game in the future, he made no promises and made it clear that their attention was solely focused on Cinder at this time. So that was a lot, and we still have a ton to discuss. Why did this all happen? What went wrong with Fer.al, and why does Cinder exist? Well, let's try to unpack this whole mess. I know everyone always says, oh, this thing was such a garbage fire, what a disaster, but no, the implosion of Fer.al was an actual train wreck, and if information has been a little bit all over the place, it's just because there's so much to cover. So let's try to make sense of all of this. In my opinion, there were 3 big contributing factors to the downfall of Fer.al. The first factor was the commercial failure of Fer.al. Having played the game a bit myself, I can safely say that Fer.al was a really nice game. It had beautiful graphics, it had cool design and art direction, and really innovative customization tools that were super well received. But that's just it. The graphics were beautiful and nice, but the game lacked substance. A lot of quests and challenges were just fetch quests and playing tedious minigames, and the leveling mechanic only added more grinding to the game. Players had long been asking for a more structured gameplay loop with classes, parties, and more in-depth quests, but these features were shelved in favor of bugged season passes, which just reinforced this competitive, grinding collectathon gameplay. MMOs like Fer.al need strong gameplay loops to hook the player in and keep them coming back daily, but Fer.al didn't really have any sense of progression and didn't give players much reasons to keep logging in other than to grind the season pass for cosmetic items. Like I said, the game needed substance, but that was okay because it was in early access and it takes time to make a great game. It's not fair to expect a brand new developing game to be this amazing experience right out of the gate. But the issue was that Wildworks didn't really seem to be working on any core gameplay mechanics or features because they were so focused on pushing out season passes and paid content every few months. We touched on the issue of Fer.al's paid content in the earlier section, but it's worth bringing up here because I think that adding paid content this early on in the game was one of the worst things Wildworks could have done. Obviously games need to get funded. Wildworks needed money to develop and keep this thing running, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the gameplay just wasn't there yet. You can't take a bare bones beta test and start pushing out paid content and locking features behind paywalls the moment you launch. You have to get players invested. Fer.al's focus on pushing out buggy season passes rather than improving the foundations and core mechanics of the game led to them having to stop development and start re-releasing seasons, and by then it was sort of already the beginning of the end. They had hoped to create another profitable and self-sustaining game like Animal Jam that would increase their revenue, but instead it became a money sink that they struggled at every turn to make profitable. The second and potentially the biggest contributing factor was the poor communication and unprofessionalism. As we discussed earlier, communication became less and less frequent as time went on, and after the tragic passing of Fer.al's beloved community manager Petz Catz, who had essentially been the backbone of the community and the only thing holding everything together, the responsibility fell to the moderators and unpaid server volunteers, many of whom were only teenagers. As we can see from the moderator sign-up form, the minimum age for moderators and volunteers was 16, which seems pretty irresponsible of Wildworks, especially when they explicitly state that mods will be regularly exposed to controversial, toxic, and triggering content. Even if their intentions were good, it seems strange that a professional games company would be hiring 16 and 17-year-olds to do unpaid moderation for them, but maybe that's just me. After the loss of Petz, which heavily affected the entire community, the mods were left to quell the insanity of the Fer.al Discord server with absolutely no help from Wildworks. The way that Wildworks handled those last few months, just refusing to give any updates and leaving the unpaid moderators to deal with the mess that they made, it's such poor form. Communication issues had plagued Fer.al since day one, and we've already covered a lot of it, but one thing that I don't see people mention very often is that their main form of communication was through Discord. Announcements, bug fixes, plans, updates, and game discussion all happened on Discord, and while I see what they were going for with the whole cozy community vibe, it could also be a bit chaotic and disorganized. Information got lost, unruly behavior got out of control fast, and I think that the more casual tone of the server sort of lent itself to unprofessionalism. With an official website and curated social media platforms, everything is professional and thought out, but with Discord it's easy for admins to make an angry comment or a silly statement in the heat of the moment that ends up being screenshotted like a billion times. Communication is vital on any project, and while it seems like they really did try in the beginning, they fell back into a pattern of ignoring the players and sweeping feedback under the rug. The third contributing factor was Wildworks itself and its relationship to the crypto space. Many have pointed out that Animal Jam has taken an openly anti-crypto stance in the past, literally putting information about why it's harmful in their game, but the hypocrisy doesn't stop there. Believe it or not, and despite his comments about yearning for a Bored Ape, CEO Clark Stacey wasn't always an avid crypto supporter, in fact quite the opposite. Tweets from as early as September of 2021, mere months before the announcement of Cinder, read, quote, "Totally this, and crap art is just that. When the veil of buzzy gimcrackery fades away, you aren't going to be left holding a piece of history, you're going to be holding a piece of crap." This is a good place to quickly debunk a common rumor. See, because of how Cinder worded it on their website, they made it sound like they'd been developing the game for 2 years alongside Fer.al. They phrased it like this because they wanted to make NFT buyers think the project is a labor of love and years of hard work rather than a quick reskin of a failed game they shut down. But the wording led players to believe that Wildworks had created Fer.al as a way to trick people into beta testing their NFT game, and that Cinder had always been secretly developing alongside Fer.al, waiting to take over when the time was right. However, this isn't true, as we can see that the CEO only became interested in crypto in 2021, and he even said as much himself. Wildworks wasn't like playing the long game and scheming in the shadows to trick their players, it was just a rash decision that they made once the money began to run out. Ex-moderator Indigo wrote on the topic, quote, "In my opinion, Cinder was very likely a spur-of-the-moment decision to get their money's worth out of the assets that they already had. It's hard to pinpoint when development got started, but at the earliest it was January of last year, which is when they said it started. Though Clark was against NFTs up until October, and Cinder is very bare. It doesn't look like something that's been worked on for a year, and I wouldn't be surprised if it started much later than January." So what made Wildworks go from this to, and I quote the actual website here, "It turns out a group of crypto enthusiasts and NFT collectors have been lurking in the shadows of our company for years." The physical location of Wildworks HQ might have actually played a role in this decision. Wildworks is located in Salt Lake City, Utah, which has become an extremely popular location for tech companies and startups over the last decade, to the point where it's known as Silicon Slopes. On the Silicon Slopes website, we can see tons of Garbo articles about crypto and NFTs, and a lot of big companies that fall under the Silicon Slopes umbrella have also been getting into them as of late. It's possible that Wildworks, already backed into a corner with their failing game, got the idea from the Silicon Slopes community and decided to get into NFTs. The online crypto community likely played a part as well, and Stacey openly claimed that Cinder was inspired by other crypto games like the loathsome Axie Infinity. When players repeatedly pointed out that Stacey had to have known that the backlash to their decision would be bad, he admitted that he and the staff were well aware of the negative reception that they would get. He simply said that Cinder and Fer.al had two very different demographics, and Cinder wasn't meant to appeal to Fer.al players but rather NFT buyers and crypto enthusiasts. This is backed up by a series of DMs between Twitter user @Mariyina and Clark Stacey. After expressing anti-NFT views, Clark Stacey got in touch with the user to discuss crypto and NFTs and ask why they were opposed to them. Weirdly, this isn't the only instance of the CEO reaching out to Twitter users to discuss crypto, but to be fair to him, these discussions do seem to genuinely be in good faith. It's a shame that they never amounted to anything more than an okay, let's agree to disagree conclusion, because players were providing a lot of valid points about the damaging effects of crypto and how the decision would affect the Fer.al community. And reminder, these conversations took place months before the closure of Fer.al and even before the announcement of Cinder, so they were fully aware of how players felt and how they would react. Despite the fact that Wildworks very clearly knew that the backlash would be bad and said as much themselves, they seemed to show a very strong strong disdain and annoyance for the community as soon as the backlash started. From former moderator Ishmael, quote, "After Cinder was announced, the Fer.al community was considered extremely hostile by Wildworks." Backing this up is yet another screenshot of the conversation between @Mariana and Clark Stacy as he wrote in response to their question about whether Fer.al would ever be sold, quote, "We have conversations with publishers interested in acquiring existing titles all the time. Among those that could actually assume the cost of running Fer.al, few are interested in inheriting a community that will send them death threats, threaten to blow up their offices, and attack their other games in response to unpopular business decisions. But hey, you never know." I want to make it very clear that this behavior isn't okay. Death threats and harassment are never okay under any circumstances, and the Wildworks team were absolutely right to speak up about this, and they were right to feel upset. But by tarring the entire community with the same brush because of a few bad apples, they completely ignore all of the passionate, civil, and well-spoken players who took time out of their lives to engage in thoughtful dialogue with Wildworks. I have no doubt that there were some extremely disturbed individuals who sent threats and harassed the staff, and it's okay to call those people out, but it's unfair to label the entire community that supported you for 2 years as toxic and just kick them to the curb. A lot of players paint the staff as these evil, cold-hearted, money-hungry people, and while I understand the urge to jump to this conclusion, I really don't think it's the case. I don't think that any of the artists, writers, coders, or developers wanted to see 2 years of work go down the drain for a cheap money grab, but they were at the mercy of the Wildworks higher-ups. After 2 years of trying to make this game work, the flaws in its core gameplay meant that it never got off the ground enough to become profitable. As the company worked harder and crunched to generate revenue and push out season passes, that tight-knit, transparent, and open community spirit slowly faded as communication fell off and the players were left in the dark. With no other option than to close down or sell, which as Stacy wrote would be a hard sell considering the low profitability of the game and the cost of running the servers, Wildworks hopped on the crypto bandwagon, likely inspired by other tech companies and online businesses. This very much seemed like a last-ditch attempt to salvage anything from the project and not let 2 years and probably millions of dollars go down the drain with absolutely nothing to show. Does that make their decisions and behavior okay? No, not at all, but it gives us an insight as to why those decisions were made. From there though, I have no idea what the thought process is. Are they planning on using Cinder as a way to stockpile money to reboot Fer.al? While Stacy did mention a potential reboot, he said it wasn't currently on the cards and the Cinder roadmap looks pretty long term. Did they originally plan on running the two games alongside each other before realizing server costs would be too much and opting for the more cheap and profitable option? Maybe. It's even possible that they started out with good intentions and just decided to hurriedly throw Fer.al in the bin as soon as they saw those sweet crypto dollar signs. It's really impossible to know. Ex-moderator Ishmael wrote on the topic of the Wildworks staff, quote, "I don't agree with how this was managed with my community and how we were obviously viewed as a mob of unruly children rather than people who were essentially raised by this company and are upset that the company that raised them unceremoniously kicked them to the curb. But I genuinely believe that Fer.al's closure wasn't some malicious ploy that a few people think that it is. I've met too many people within the company that had so much love and passion for the game and its community to believe that they didn't exhaust every possible avenue before making the decision to close the game." Honestly, researching and writing about the downfall of Fer.al is really sad because you can tell that the players and staff alike really cared about the project and were passionate about it and were just screwed over by a rash decision made up by the higher ups. Though this decision has almost definitely been a profitable one, I mean look how expensive these NFTs are, it's come at the cost of their reputation and the community that they've fostered. The Wildworks name, once well respected and beloved, will always be tarnished with this one decision and the way that they treated their community in the following months. Fer.al's community was so bustling and creative and supportive of each other in the game that it really sucked to see how messy and dramatic things got. The community didn't deserve to be booted from the game and disregarded by the staff in such an unceremonious way, and for the game to be shut down and replaced with a cheap and gross NFT clone is such a disappointing way for it to go out. That leaves us with the question of what will happen to Cinder. According to their sales record on Fractal, they've already sold 3,444 Cinder Fate NFTs out of 4,444 total, so they've been selling very successfully and rough estimates put their profits in the hundreds of thousands at this point. So far more lucrative and profitable than Fer.al, but in terms of the longevity of the project, I'm not so sure. NFT buyers and middle-aged crypto enthusiasts don't exactly strike me as the kind of people who would get super invested in this aesthetic furry Animal Jam MMO, and I can't imagine player numbers would be super high after the initial excitement had worn off. Most of these people are just in it to add NFTs to their collection, not because they want to play an RPG and roleplay with friends. According to the roadmap, they're planning planning on adding pay to earn features in the future, which will likely draw in more of an active audience since they'd be able to earn crypto in Cinder. Unfortunately, a lot of pay to earn crypto games seem to result in impoverished people from third world countries being employed by rich crypto bros who take a huge cut of their below minimum wage earnings, so we'll see how Cinder plans to tackle that. Whether Cinder is successful and makes Wildworks into a $1 trillion company, or whether it flops like so many NFT games before it, remains to be seen. What is clear though is that this money has come at the cost of losing the community that once trusted and supported them. At the end of the day, the downfall of Fer.al affected many people, from the players who supported it financially to the moderators who were left to manage the entire community by themselves, to the many non-crypto loving employees who I'm sure exist at Wildworks and now have to work on a slimy NFT game which is a shell of the passion project they spent 2 years handcrafting. The whole situation really sucks, and I don't see Fer.al making a return anytime soon, especially with how broken the community's trust is. Hopefully those who played, worked on and developed the game can move on and find better communities that will treat them right. While I empathize with Wildworks in the tough position they were put in when funds were low, the decision to branch into NFTs is a cheap and disingenuous one that will leave a permanent mark on the brand. To see Wildworks go from condemning crypto to openly supporting and profiting off it is really disappointing, and a sad way for a company and the games that they made to fall from grace. Thank you guys so much for watching, I really appreciate it. I hope that you enjoyed that video topic. If you have any experiences with Fer.al, or if you played it or were involved in any of these situations, definitely let me know. I'm really curious and I'd really love to hear some like player experiences, because the whole situation is so messy, there's so much going on, so I'm really curious to hear what you guys think and what your experiences are. And again, I want to reiterate, because apparently you have to, please don't harass or go seek out any of the people involved in Wildworks, whether that be staff or moderators or the higher ups, like literally anyone. Just don't engage with them on that level. Even if you disagree with what they did, it's not okay to harass people. So yeah, please be civil. If you have any suggestions for future video topics you want me to cover, definitely let me know down below. Thank you so much to Switchcraft for sponsoring me. They're super cool, please go check them out, and yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I really hope to see you in the next one. Bye! Thank you so much to my Garfield overlords over on Patreon: Fitzy, Jorge K. Cruz, Michelle Olsen, Matt LRJ, and Ginkgo Fox, Chicory, Trebizonde, SHSL Sunsun, Doug, Jordan Nielsen, Dana Homegardner, Charlie B, Simon, John Leach, Ren Pendragon, Pom, Agarafin, Xavier Araujo, Helm Hamburger Hand, Lady Cerebellum, Dozo Blint, Sheriff Whiskey, The Fabulibrarian, Red Meth, Astrian Vortex, Jesse Chisholm, Sophie Skidder, Brianna Robinson, Grip Gunderson, Jane, Kimono My Gyro, Joe Bradshaw, and Arcantilus. Thank you guys so much for supporting me. If you want to join these guys over on Patreon, the link will be in the description, and yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!